Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Eric Smith. I'm a contributor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Here we're going to do a week 4 review of the Dolphins offensive line grades. And this was a tough one. I've been described as an apologist for the Dolphins offensive line, usually in much more colorful terms than that. But I feel like I've been pretty consistent on 2 points. And number one is that I'm not trying to convince anyone that this is the best offensive line in the NFL. And that's never been the goal of the offensive line build for this resume. And number two is the offensive line isn't even close to the biggest issue on this team. After the Titans game, we can't even point to Devon Achane as the shining light for someone on the offense still producing at a high level. So I know the offensive line has been the easy target for years, but I'm going to continue to try and provide a level-headed analysis of their performance each week. My grading system values consistency. There's not much room for extra rewards for driving a defender an extra 5 yards downfield or getting a pancake on a lead block. I simply want offensive linemen who consistently carry out what is asked of them from play to play. With that in mind, the line has actually graded pretty well through the first 3 weeks of the season, averaging a grade of 8.39. This week was a poor performance across the board, and the offensive line as a whole was no exception to that. This week's overall grade of 7.21 is the lowest grade of the season. Miami actually had the same 5 offensive linemen for the entire game, which didn't happen often last year and hasn't happened for half the games in 2024. Here, in parentheses, is the average grades for each lineman over the first 3 weeks of the season. Patrick Paul doesn't have one listed since he had a total of one regular season snap on offense before last night. Unfortunately, each lineman who played last night graded worse than the average of their first 3 weeks. All right, let's pull the band-aid off. Robert Jones has been the lowest graded lineman in every game this year. And this game was significantly worse than any of those. For a player that had been consistently solid when asked to play in the past, he's fallen off a cliff this year and has gotten worse every week. When we talk about changes being made, I feel like this is one that should be strongly considered. I never thought I'd look for Lester Cotton to return to the lineup, but at this point, he might be considered an upgrade over Jones. All right, just going to take a look at one play for Robert Jones here. So this is an outside zone type play, going to be going to the left. And you can see that as they get off the ball, Patrick Paul's helping him a little bit. Robert Jones looks like he's in good position here, but as we've seen it show up time and time again, his lack of athleticism just doesn't allow him to continue to run and cut off this defender. So this defender is able to continue to wash him to the side and eventually shed that block to get in on the play. Next up, we got Eichenberg, who played a okay game, coming in at a 7.37 after 2 strong weeks to the season for Eichenberg to start. This is now 2 in a row where he hasn't been awful, but it's probably been slightly below average. If Eichenberg was the worst starting offensive lineman on the roster, we'd probably be in okay shape. But that's not the reality of what we have right now. So as we get into the film for Eichenberg here, we're going to do one bad and one good. And this was his bad play that we're going to share this week. And you can see that off the snap of the ball here, he's just not getting his hands on that defender, oversets a bit, and that defender is able to swipe his hands away and get a pretty quick pressure on the quarterback. For our good play for Eichenberg this week, this is going to be a outside zone to the right, and kind of similar to what we were looking at with Rob Jones before, except the difference here is that you can see that Liam Eichenberg is starting in good position, getting a little bit of help from Jackson, but you can see the difference in the way that he finishes the play and that he's able to create a little bit of vertical movement and then get his hips around to seal that defender off, which is what Rob Jones was missing on that earlier play. And then we get to the much awaited grade for the rookie second round pick, Patrick Paul. As you can see, Paul was a little above average looking at the grades from this game in a vacuum, but he was a bit lower than the current season average for the offensive line. I'd call this a very encouraging debut for Paul. He never looked in over his head, and some of his negative grades were small technique issues with footwork or just understanding the assignments a little better. But that's stuff that'll come with continued game reps. All right, looking at our bad rep for Paul here, you can see that this is going to be a play action, giving some outside zone look here. And Patrick Paul is setting very aggressively to that defensive end, but he gets into almost a bit of a hop with this step as opposed to kicking out there or, kind of getting out there if he was going to run block him and keeping his feet under him a little bit. And the result of that is that he gets a little off balance, leaning a little bit forward, and that defensive end's able to shed and get inside there. Um, this does end up resulting in a sack, but like I said from the beginning with this, you know, there was plenty of other good plays from Paul, and stuff like this is just a learning experience and stuff that I have confidence that he'll clean up in the future. And then for our good play for Paul, we're going to be back to that play that we looked at for Rob Jones earlier, this outside zone type look. And you see Paul giving a little bit of help with Robert Jones there, but the reason I'm including this play is just his ability to get into space and to locate a target. And granted, plenty of other stuff didn't go very well on this play, particularly Robert Jones. But if you keep your eyes focused on Patrick Paul here climbing to the next level, if we can get to the point that we are getting those initial blocks on the edge and then getting a Jalen Wright into the secondary, having a block like that at the second or third level, that's the difference between some of these gains being 8 to 10 yards and being able to pop them for 40, 50 yards and scoring. All right, so similar to last year, Austin Jackson is actually off to a pretty hot start to the season in my grades. I've come to terms with the fact that Jackson may never look the part. He still has issues in true pass sets, and I don't look for that to change. He looks off balance more often than you'd like, but like I said in the opening, my grades value consistency, and Austin Jackson has found a way to consistently win his assignments whenever he's been asked. So this play here is the only zero grade that I had for Jackson in the game. I had four others where he got partial credit. And as you can see, this is a play action, long trap type concept and ends up being the play that resulted in a safety. But you can see that Jackson is stepping down, looking to block that four-eye technique defensive tackle, and just gets a little too far with his weight. And when that defensive tackle goes back to the outside, he's not able to adjust back, giving him basically a direct path to the quarterback. That ends up resulting in Robert Jones having to leave what should have been his assignment in that player in the middle there. But from Austin Jackson's perspective, this is just one of those glaringly bad plays that he seems to have, here and there. And might always be part of what he is, but he does enough other good stuff, and these are not as common as you'd think, even though they're very visible when they happen. Um, and the trade-off for that is that you get the really good stuff in the run game from Austin Jackson. And you're going to see that here. He's blocking down on this defensive tackle, and you can just see how much movement he gets on that. That defensive tackle is starting at the hash mark, and Austin Jackson's taking him almost to the other side of the play there. And that's what gives Jalen Wright a nice lane there to then read the leverage. I'm not even going to say the block by Eichenberg there to pop off a big gain here. But if you don't get that big movement by Jackson on the defensive tackle, then you never get the opportunity for that cut. So even though there are still some holes in Jackson's game, they're not as frequent as you might think, and the trade-off is that you get some really good run blocking reps like this one. And finally, this is starting to be as anticlimactic as Armstead topping the grades every week when he does play. Aaron Brewer has played at a high level every week, and his lowest grade of the season was an 8.29. The one thing I will point out is that I think there should be a little more attention on some of his inaccurate snaps. Thankfully, he hasn't had some of the costly ones that we seem to get with Connor Williams at center. But if you pay attention, you'll find his snaps playing on the edge probably far more than you're comfortable with. Just going to do one on Brewer here, and that's because he really didn't have enough bad ones to call something out. Um, this play overall obviously was not a good play, but if you lock your eyes on Brewer, you can see a really good rep here. He's trying to block back on that 4-eye defensive tackle, and he does a good job of, even though there's a lot of distance to cover there, being under control enough that as that tackle tries to swim over the top, he's able to adjust himself, flip his hips, and get a little bit of vertical movement there. Obviously, the play failed for other reasons, but this is not an easy block to make, and this is one that we're seeing Brewer make consistently in this offense. All right, so here's a graph that I plan to share at times throughout the season. It's obviously still very basic, but you can get the general idea here of how the individual grades have looked throughout the season. Probably the biggest things to note here are that Brewer and Jackson have, through 4 weeks, been consistently among the top performers, and also just how much of a nosedive Robert Jones has taken, even since the beginning of the season. Patrick Paul only has 1 point on the graph, and you can see his dot just above the dark blue line for Liam Eichenberg. All right, that's all for this week. You can check out some more detailed breakdowns from All 22 Film on Twitter or X, where my handle is at OLCoachSmith63. For some more collaborative work, check out the Scouting Combine on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, where Hassan Patel and I break down Dolphins All 22 Film. And I hope you guys are enjoying these. Some of the changes this week were based on recommendations that I received. So if you have any other suggestions on how I can continue to make these videos more beneficial for everyone that's watching, feel free to leave a comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again next week.